This female cougar is quietly approaching a group of ape camels. Her distinctive tawny fur makes her blend in perfectly with her surroundings. At the right moment, she charges, and at full speed she can reach 60 kilometers per hour in a matter of seconds, completing what seemed to be an unsuccessful hunt. The female puma, named Stella, is currently raising her four-legged 10-month-old cub. Trying to transport the huge carcass to the cubs was clearly a task he could not accomplish. Stella had no choice but to try and call his cubs to come and feed them. The hungryster could only fill his stomach for now, while his cubs were still a kilometer away. Hearing their mother's voice, the cubs began to rush to where Stella was, and the cubs soon made it to their mother's place. A rare meal, all from the hard-working mother. For Stella, the hard times were still a few months away from ending, for in a few months he would be leaving his children, but in the meantime, he would make sure that his cubs were equipped with the skills to survive. 2 weeks later, the days grew shorter and winter arrived. Everything was soon covered in a thick blanket of white, under the heavy snowfall. This was one of Stella's children. His name was Zico, and it was the first time they had seen school since they were born, and the cubs, seeing snow for the first time, looked excited. For them, the playfulness was now also an opportunity to increase their hunting experience. As winter deepens and the environment becomes harsher, the ape women have moved to lower ground to escape the wind and snow. And while America was a family that had to be human hungry during the cold season, Stella also waited in agony for the blizzard to leave, and was now using his body heat to provide warmth for his cubs. Soon after the blizzard stopped, the face of all things was reared. Stella began to lead his cubs out to hunt. But they weren't the only emergents hunting here either. Soon he saw a male cougar appear not far away. The male cougar was named Montero, a round camel he had captured not long ago, and he was now feasting on a large meal. In a time when food was scarce, Stella was going to risk praying for some food from Montero's mouth, but if Montero was unwilling to share, it would most likely kill his cubs. At this moment in time, Stella began to bravely walk towards him, and again we too watched the situation at hand nervously from a short distance away. It was clear that Montero was reluctant to share his spoils, and Stella was forced to wait for the time being. Perhaps Montero would leave him a few scraps, after he had had his fill. Yeah, strangely enough, Stella was reluctant to leave, and his cubs seemed to see the point. The bold Zico began to bravely walk towards Montero at this point. He was so hungry, but if the male emergent sensed that he was offended, then his mother couldn't guarantee his safety. It was also probably the most reckless move Zico had ever made. Montero was definitely capable of killing the family, including his mother. But soon enough, Montero ignored Itzco and chose to continue eating. This was Montero's way of signaling to Itzco that he could approach now. As it turned out, Montero was the father of these little emergents, and the other 3 cubs began to rush over to feed at that very moment. The cubs had a strong father, and he generously shared these things with them. It was a shocking and heartwarming sight as well. Montero wasn't the only male cougar surviving in the neighborhood though. Another unfamiliar male had also appeared nearby, and as a mother, Stella knew that this scent wasn't a friend he knew, and that the best strategy for the immediate future was to lead his cubs to a safe shelter. Stella had absolute knowledge of this area. Taking advantage of the cover of night, they grabbed their way out, but he still miscalculated. The unfamiliar male cougar attacked Stella last night. He had a hole bitten out of his neck by the male cougar, and his 4 children were missing. Stella didn't dare stop for a moment as he anxiously searched for his children near the lake. Luckily, soon Zico heard his mother calling, and behind him followed his sister. As a brother, Zico bravely guarded his sister through the night, but his other 2 sisters were unaccounted for. Time passed and the plains still resounded with the screams of Stella's broken heart. A few days later, his child was found in a valley where he lay forever. Stella searched for weeks before finally, and helplessly choosing to give up. A few months later, the weather warmed up and spring came to Patagonia. The earth bursts into life and the animals have renewed hope, but Stella, still burdened by the crisis of the territory, begins to travel east with his children. They came to an area 11 kilometers away. They were far from the habitats of the other emergent divisions, but Stella had lost his 2 daughters forever, and his 2 remaining children were more precious to him than ever. But it was time to teach them the art of hunting. Saruta was 3 times larger than the weakly Poe, so trying to hunt them was not an easy task. It was a good thing that their mother was an excellent mentor and an experienced hunter. He will show the cubs how to approach these prey quietly. And while his young daughter was closely watching her mother's every move, Zico was acting distracted at the moment. Not only did the Imristar mother have extraordinary hunting experience, she also possessed an equally extraordinary sensitivity. All the original camel had to do was look in his direction, and he would immediately freeze in place. Once in attack range, he began to show the most important movements to the cubs. But at this most critical moment, an impatient Zico interrupts his mother's attack. The commotion of Zico playing with his sister startled Yuan Tuo, who was not far away, and the hateful look showed on Stella's face. The family hadn't had a full meal in a week. The hungry Stella family was gnawing on a pile of rounded bones. It had been a week since their last full meal. Times had begun to get especially hard for Stella after the loss of her 2 children. It would be a good luck if they could rummage through the nest and find a few eggs, but reality was often harsh, and there was nothing inside the bird's nest. Soon another female cougar appeared in this part of Stella's area, and he had to confront her head-on in order to guard his cubs, while he pressed on this strange female for the state division. Eventually, the outsider was successfully forced back by him. Having not dipped lost for a long time, Stella was famished with his family, and he was forced to leave his cubs behind and go forth to hunt alone. Now Stella was very weak, but for the sake of his family to have a full meal, he had to do his best to leave his cubs behind, and also to prevent them from destroying Stella's ambush again. Now he had to concentrate fully on the hunt and try to succeed at once. Seeing the actual Stella struck, even at the risk of having his spine broken by a round lump stepping on it, he dared not let up at all, for he and his children faced starvation if they did not eat. This was also a fight for life. Finally, he put the huge prey down on the ground, but the round tor's tenacious vitality was also fighting to the death, which had used up almost all of his strength. It was a good thing that he finally succeeded when he was in the midst of his calamities. He couldn't wait to call the cubs over to share this hard-won event with him. It also earned him and the cubs a chance to survive, but he couldn't raise his children for the rest of his life either. They needed to grow up quickly. Over the next few days, Stella's family relied on the ape camel's carcass for energy, and the large round door was now left with very little for them to eat. But just then, an outsider came into the Stella family's neighborhood. But while Stella didn't feel threatened by the lone female wanderer in front of her, Stella's daughter was less than welcoming to the strange female, as he didn't want to share the food with her until he was full. And it was only when he felt that he had almost eaten that he chose to step back and let the strange female have the rest of the food. The mother, Stella, graciously chose to share this time, as he hoped to be rewarded in time to come, and perhaps in the days to come when his cubs could beg for some food when they were struggling to feed themselves. With the onset of summer, the daylight hours lengthen to 16 hours, and animals of all kinds have given birth to their babies. The babies have to learn to stand and run within minutes of birth, as they are constantly on the lookout for martyrs. Stella took advantage of the season in which the garden camels were born to speed up the hunting of these young ones to feed his babies. And as his children's appetites grew and food began to be fought over, Stro was ready for a harder life. It was a sunny afternoon, and a tired Stella was resting, while his daughter by now looked to have the shadow of an adult emerge in division. He had been alone with his children for a while, and at this point Stella knew it was time for him to leave. The cubs didn't know yet that their mother wouldn't be coming back this time, but Stella understood that it was time for his children to survive on their own as well. The cubs were still waiting with eyes full of hope for their mother's return, but they were slow to see his dignity. And a few kilometers away, Stella was heading for the mountains. His mission had been accomplished, and he would soon have a new family again. His daughter was also soon to become an excellent hunter. His brother, Zico, on the other hand, has become in need of his sister's protection, and only catches up quickly with her for food when she is full. But they will one day be separated, and his sister will start a family of her own. Stella is a top-notch martyr and an excellent mother. This has allowed him to continue his offspring and survive in these crisis-ridden mountains, and only time will tell how strong and resilient he is.